So tonight I'd like to welcome Dave Byrne along. Dave, we are here primarily to talk about your recent FKT run on Hannells Spur. But I thought just for everybody here, you've got a long history in running. You've been running for a long time since really probably quite an elite level as a schoolboy. I just thought we might set the scene a bit with some background on yourself, and can you tell us a bit about your running background as I guess school into early years out of school, and I imagine probably quite hopeful of chasing Olympic dreams at that point of your running.
Sorry, thanks everyone for coming. It's raining and horrible, so I thought it'd be like 3 people here. So I'm pretty stoked, but you're all here because Brendan's here. I'll be honest, I idolise Brendan. He's like that. My transition into trail running was Brendan, my inspiration, and that I'm happy to say it. It was. I watched you. I'm going to jump ahead, but I watched Brendan win UTA. We were there filming it, and I hadn't run in years. I'd stopped. I'd chucked it in and gone, why would you run unless someone's chasing you? And then I watched Brendan. We're there filming it, and all day I'm watching this bloke, and I'm like, surely he's going to stop and walk for a bit. And I said to the cameraman, I'm like, I reckon he's just running for the cameras. But and then he won. And then I was like, this sport is epic. I'm going to do it. So anyway, and I remember I used to email you and ask you questions. So, but yeah, I started out as a track runner. I was a 400, 800 runner, probably the smallest 400 runner you'll ever see, but the angriest. So yeah, and then as a junior and always had aspirations of Olympics and the like. But in all honesty, probably never had the head for it because. In saying that, a lot of these guys, you've got to be so single-minded, and I was always off wanting to run up mountains and go bush and go fishing. I was obsessed with fishing. And so, I was running really well, and I went to, World Juniors and things like that, and then and went to World Cross Country as a senior and got won national titles and things, but never really was, to be honest, good enough. But always flogged myself trying to get there, and then chucked it in after Melbourne Com Games, and and then had a break, and then saw Brendan and started trail running.
Great, thanks you. And look, I guess you've preempted my question about the transition. What sparked the transition from a track background through not really running a lot? And look, from the era that you were in the track, there's a few names that float around. I know Joel Fitzgerald probably is a similar sort of era to you. Who's dabbled in some of the trail and ultra events as well. But I guess since you've come across then and been racing predominantly, in bush running, trail running, what are obviously knapsack 6 hour is the highlight. But beyond that, what are some of the highlights for you in your time in this sort of world of trail running from your experiences?
My biggest highlight was an epic failure. But it was because of where that epic failure happened. It meant I spent more time in an awesome place. Was running the Eiger in Switzerland. That was pretty rad. It's an amazing race. Tell everyone if you're ever going to do a international trail race, that's the one I would do, and I'm desperate to go back and run it again and try and be and not explode. But I mean locally, there's obviously 6 foot, which is awesome. Growing up, you know about 6 foot, even if you're a track runner, and winning that was pretty rad. Losing that was even radder because I lost to Stu in the year he got the record. And other than that, UTA is always awesome. Most of the best experiences I've had have also been from spectating. I really enjoy being around the events more as much as I like running them. Sometimes running them's not as enjoyable because of the stress, and I really feel the stress for some reason. I probably shouldn't. I used to be more chilled out with racing, but I don't know, it just does my head in now. I constantly think about it. I'm like, man, for like weeks you think about it. But when you're a spectator, you just go there and have a great time. So, maybe just be a spectator, hey?
I like the way you're talking. The other good thing you've mentioned there is because we're recording this, I can't wait to point out to Ardip that you've referenced when his record got broken, and so that's a highlight for me of this interview already. Look, I suppose then, this FKT world might be something that would be interesting to a number of us. It's certainly got a lot of interest in the past 12 months with our worldwide, shift in how life happens for us. Do you think that's something that you'd pursue more of? I guess in the context, are you more relaxed in that FKT world than going into a race? And is it something that you're interested in more broadly?
Look, the beauty of FKTs is that you can do them when you choose. So the limitation with a race, and I always found that as a track runner, is you've got an 800-metre run, you've got 1 minute, under 1 minute and 50 seconds to do your job on a set day. There's no flexibility around it at all. Whereas if you want to go and do an FKT, you plan it around your life when you're going to be fit and ready, and you can have a window of multiple days in which to do it. And so it to me, it certainly has piqued my interest a lot, not just because of events not being on, but also the explorative side of things. You can do things that others haven't done before, and that part of it is really interesting and exciting, because you're looking at maps and you're planning and you're looking at routes, and there's a lot of unknowns. Whereas with an event, it's all you pretty much just rock on up and follow the ribbon, the pink ribbon in the trees. Whereas with some of these FKTs that I've been looking at, and I've been looking at a lot over the last couple of years, there's a lot of research, and that's part of the fun of it all, is the planning and preparation and research, and there is still stress and pressure and all that as well, but it's different. It is different, and when you do one, you sort of sit there going, well, that's going to go and get smashed soon, so then you want to go back and make it a bit quicker.
Oh, sorry. Yes, so fastest known time. So I guess it's the world of records, but in a context where it's not in an established event. I wish I could associate with that 1 minute 50 thing for 800. But that's all good. So can we then focus a bit on the most recent FKT, the Hannells Spur run? But before we start to dig into your particular run, my understanding is it was part of a week or a weekend focus from a whole range of athletes supported by North Face, where they locally sort of picked the thing that they wanted to chase. Can you talk a bit about those 10 athletes, I think it was, and how that focus came together, the sorts of things that you're aware of people were chasing, and maybe any of the achievements that you're aware of?
Well, look, it was a global campaign to show. Essentially, it was a shoe launch. That's the marketing side of things. But it was more for athletes to go out there and do epic stuff, and not have to do it in a racing context. And I think the biggest one of all was Power Capel attempting sub 20 for UTMB, which was unbelievable. Even just to run that stupid course for the sake of just trying to run really on your own. Like, man, why would you want to hurt for that long? But so he's kind of like the big fish, Powell. But there were athletes all around the world that were chasing FKTs to prove the technology and the evolution in the North Face footwear. There was an Aussie crew. There was that featured a Kiwi, Vic Beck, a Kiwi woman living in Mackay, and we all converged upon Thredbo. That was our little base, and then from there, we each picked different FKTs that kind of piqued our interest. And for Blake, his was a bit more explorative, going out on the Sentinel, which is unreal. I was really actually pretty jealous when we're out there filming it and that. I'm looking at the drone and I'm looking at where he is, and I'm like, man, I wish I picked that one. Just because it was unreal. It was cool, because I want to go back and do that one. But pick the right side. There's this bit, you've got to pick the right side of this little ridgeline bit. You could fall and die on one side, or you get through it pretty safely on the other. He went on the ugly side at one point, and I still watched. I sort of thought he was going to fall. I kept saying to myself, go back, but he got through it. And Vic's one was more like a traditional kind of ascent. She went from the village straight up the fastest, most direct route possible to the summit of Cozzy. Yeah, and I picked Hannells.
So that's a perfect lead in I guess, so you've picked Hannell's Spur, and on the limited time I've had to do a bit of reading about Hannell's Spur. I have to say it's sparked my interest to find out a bit more about it. Can you tell us a bit about, what you've learnt about Hannell's, why that appealed to you and why that became your choice? I did see a reference to a conversation with Sean Greenhill, which is always dangerous when we're talking about going up hills. So yeah, just a bit of background on Hannell's Spur and how you came to choose that.
Yeah, so I'd heard about Hannells ages ago. Thought it was well beyond my capacities as a skinny-legged dude. But like for me, I love the history of it as much as it is it's pretty cool being the biggest climb that we have in Australia in a single ascent, you could call it. It's got an awesome history because for thousands of years it was used by Indigenous people to go from the plains country up into the high country, and then Strzelecki used it for his ascent to Kosi. And so, it's just got this really cool history and the whole idea of it's a European style climb compared to most of the mountains we have here, and there's not many of those, and that it traverses multiple environments. You're going from 400 odd metres altitude, which is like that dry sclerophyllous sort of scrub, your typical eucalypt stuff, and then as you're going, the environment just keeps changing, and then it opens up, and it's this beautiful high country. And so all my research into it was just getting me really pumped to do it for something different. And then I started seeing all these people doing it. Brendan went up there, bloody heaps of people were going up there, and I'm like, what's going on? I thought it was a secret. I thought they're going to go way too quick, and I'm not going to get close to this thing. Luckily, Brendan didn't actually go and do it. He was just chilling out and checking out the top part of it, as he was telling me. But, it's being the biggest climb in Australia, you can imagine, having done, mountains like Feathertop and the like, it's a very different proposition. And so, I just thought, why not give it a nudge?
So let's have a talk about the day itself, the run that you went there. I have to admit, being a tragic Facebook stalker of anyone who I aspire to be, including yourself probably in that list, Dave, I saw some photos through the week which looked some spectacular camping sites, waking up to the morning. I remember the very cheery barista photo that's up there. And my impression was, he's really invested in this. He's got up there for the week. He's recce'd all the parts of the course through the week leading up to it. He's got a good feel for it. And then he set himself at the end of the week to have a crack at the FKT. And then I found out that you actually ran at sight unseen for your FKT attempt, which is obviously a really challenging way to take on something like that, because you don't know. Like, you hit a climb and you don't know if this is going to go for 3Ks at this gradient or whether it's just a couple of 100 metres and then I'll get to rest at the top. So I guess what I'm interested in, having taken that approach of sight unseen, can you talk us through your day, some of the challenges that came up, maybe that might relate to not really knowing what was coming ahead of you? And I guess the thing that many runners are interested to hear from, particularly from our elite runners, is when those challenges come up, what do you do to manage that, to get through it and to push on?
Yeah. So I picked the brains of a couple of people prior. Tim McCartney-Snape was up there with us, and we pored over maps the night before and looked at bloody where this thing went. And he's a details man. He knows every inch of every mountain on the planet, I reckon. And yeah, he described it all to me. I spoke to Sean Greenhill. I sent out messages to where is he? I'm blind as a bat. I need glasses. Well, I do wear glasses, but asking people what it's like and what's the rivers like, all this stuff. But until you're there, you don't really know. And I grossly underestimated it from many perspectives. I didn't have enough water, enough fuel. The temperature down the bottom, it's really hot, and then it cools down as you're getting up there. You know, in the first 9.5k or 9k is 1,500 metres of climbing, but there's downhill in there. You know, there's flats and downs in amongst it, so it's really ugly, and you're kind of in this. It's single track. It's well marked early on, but it just climbs and climbs and climbs, and like you said, you don't know where the downs or the flats are. You don't know, you know, where the free-flowing running is. There's none at all. And the worst part was I deluded myself thinking I'd get to the top of the actual main spur track and all the maps and that, you know, it looks flat. And I was like, man, I'm humming through there. And that's where I lost all my time, you know, because I went off and I went up through the bloody scrub and I was getting angry and I'm angry at the best of times, you know, and so then, you know, and I'm looking, I'm going, there's Cozzy, it's just bloody there on your right-hand side, but it takes ages to get there. And and that last part, the prettiest part of all, you know, you got to get it right, and it's not really marked, the last part of it, so you can lose a lot of time. And so looking back at it, you know, it's there to be crushed, the time, you know, and hopefully someone will, and then hopefully I will.
So you have something I can associate with now. I can't associate with a 150-800, but I can associate with seeing the peak, and it takes forever to get there. That sits very naturally with my running abilities. So look, we haven't really talked about your time. You talked about a time that you think can be beaten, and I know that just talking to you before, you've got a real interest in potentially having another crack yourself, having seen it once. What was your time, and what do you think is you don't remember, roughly?
2:38.
Okay, 2:38, and so I guess, what do you think's possible out there?
Look, for a purist uphill runner, you know, you should be able to get there in like 2.25 or under. You know, I mean, if I went back, I'd want 2.25. Maybe if you have a magic day and everything goes right and it's nice and cool, probably, yeah, like just over 2 hours, I reckon, is doable.
And I suppose, what's the just so people can put that in perspective, what's the distance? What's the elevation gain?
Okay, so it's 15.5 kilometres, or call it 10 mile from start to top of Cozzy. And in that time you climb roughly 1,890 metres, thereabouts. But like I said, the bulk of that comes in the first 9Ks. And it's not so much the vertical gain over distance. It's not a groomed trail, you know. There's markings, but there's trees down. There's not free running. It's power hiking. It gets quite technical. And even, like I said, the flat stuff isn't flat. Even if you get the right route, you're going through mud and marshy sort of stuff. So I think, yeah, I reckon 2 hours 10. Give it a crack.
I'm sure many of us, as this FKT world, I think, will continue to grow. We'll be eagerly watching, particularly given, I think, the stature that this FKT could well build in Australia, given the nature of the distance, the history, etc. you've talked about. Look, I know there was probably a couple of people in the crowd that have said that they've got a question or two. Are you happy to take a couple from the crowd? Before we do, I had one that came in, actually, that I was asked, and I thought that he might be here today, and it came from a very heated conversation after 6 Foot on the weekend, and it was basically suggesting that as an elite runner who's done all these immense things, how do you cope with only being the second fastest student from Colo High School? Because Luke Taylor is of strong belief that he was a little bit faster than you.
No. Luke, he's a good kid. He's a good kid. But he's a lot slower. I mean, maybe he might have been faster than me as a school kid over 5K. That's because you only ran 5K as a school kid because you were too slow to run fast races. Because when you're a school kid, the popular kids do the fast stuff. Chicks dig the guys that did the fast stuff.
It's I'm glad this is recorded because we needed an answer for Luke. Put him back in his place after he's actually in Luke's credit, an incredible run on the weekend to finish 9th at 6 foot from wave 2. For those who are interested, so we had a little bit of slalom work to do on the single track early to be able to run that. And I believe he was still quite respectful and didn't push too many people off the track to get through early. Look, is there anyone out there that has a question of Dave? It could be about his FKT attempt or some of the other things we've heard about.
For that kind of vert, and do you have like specific techniques for going uphill?
Yeah, look, I'm not really well known as a climber. I can run up a mountain perfectly well. For me, what I do is I live in the middle of the city. I've got no mountains to run up, which sucks. But stairs and weighted vest. So, because it's all about realistically running up a mountain's power to weight ratio, but your capacity to suffer. And I'll tell I've said this a lot. The hardest race you will ever do, I don't believe it's about distance. People talk about the longest, running 100 miles in big mountains. You run 10K track, that's bloody horrible because it's incredibly hard. It's really intense and you're suffering the whole time and there's no hiding and it's intense for multiple days leading into it because of what's on the horizon. So it's like a time trial, You just got a red line and you got to know where you can sit and how much, you can put up with snot and dribble and stuff coming out and you just get on with it, It's because at that sort of distance and vertical gain, like there are mechanics and so on that do play a part. But if you can manage a steady state of that's a really high pain tolerance and capacity to suffer, then you don't need big mountains to train on. You just need to bloody learn to love it, man.
All right, great. Any other questions out there for Dave while we've got him? Grant.
The top bit was not really marked and a bit rough. In the FKT world, would it be unethical or against an unwritten world for someone to go and peg out the best route and maybe groom a little bit of it? Or would that
Oh, look, the FKT world's still a bit, it's all being discovered. Like, it's like, say, for example, do you cut switchbacks in a race? Some people do. In Europe, they do. In America, you don't. Australia, you don't cut a switchback. In the FKT world, it's about going. Hanel Spur is a known track, but once you finish the spur track, technically, do you just go direct to the summit? Because you could, but is that going to be the fastest? So yeah, you could probably recce it and go. Look, it's about doing Hanels and then summiting. In my mind, look, you wouldn't go out there and mark the thing. You might recce it, but I mean, I think the best strategy would be, probably beelining it to the summit. I reckon that's the coolest strategy. You get ugly because it's like really technical and rocky and full on, but I reckon that'd be. Yeah, that's right. I reckon it's about the quickest. I reckon it's the quickest from once you get off the known marked track. In my opinion, it's the quickest to get to the top. And whatever route you take within keeping of the environment and so on. You don't want to, be treading on wombats and stuff.
I think we've got most of the questions that were there. I'm sure there might be some that people might like to come and have a chat to you after, just for a minute or so, Dave, if that's okay with you. Look, can we all thank Dave very much for coming here and having a run with us tonight, and a bit of a chat. And I think the last thing we had to finish off, that I'm of the belief that there's some things to try on, plenty of different sizes with the shoes here from North Face, and I'm led to believe there's some things to give away, if that's correct.